This program will cover mature topics such as sex and sexuality, and is meant for education and entertainment only.
You're listening to Sexually Charged Radio at the University of Guelph on CFRU 93.3 FM and online at cfru.ca. Welcome to Sexually Charged Radio. I am Ruthie. I'm here today with Thomas and Austin. How are you both doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for asking. You want to tell us a little bit about yourself, Austin?
Yeah, I'm in my second year in Guelph for the Applied Human Nutrition program.
Great. And what made you want to do this?
I thought it would be a fun opportunity to kind of talk about sexuality and explore more topics about it and kind of learn on the process.
Is this an area that you study or just something you talk about with your friends and have an interest in?
It's more like an interest kind of thing.
Don't we all? How are you, Thomas?
You know, I am just dandy.
Are you dandy? Okay.
I am. You know, it's one of those days, it's a little gray outside and everything, but at least when we're recording this.
Yeah, it'll probably still be gray when it comes out, too.
Yeah, but I love the fall weather, so it's always a little exciting this time of year.
Yeah? Is this your favorite season, Austin?
No.
No? What is your favorite season?
Summer.
It's a good, safe answer. And what do you like about summer?
I like the warmth of the sun and kind of just being in shorts and like a t-shirt.
Yeah, not so much right now.
No. Way too cold for me.
Oh, well.
What about you, Ruthie? I mean, you're just newer to the Canadian, four seasons.
I'm from Michigan, so the latitude is similar to here, where I'm from. But I do like fall and spring the best. I think they are nice transition times, and I really like the smell of leaves and fires in the fireplace. You can always put on more clothes when it is cold. There is a limit to how many clothing items you can take off, and then you cannot get any cooler. So this particular weather is good for sweaty people of German heritage like myself. Excellent. Speaking of sweat and heritage, and also somebody said the word gray at some point, I have our first question. This is a student question submitted through our email address, and the question is, I've come to the understanding that I'm not entirely straight, and I've found out that the most accurate description of what I am is, everybody get ready, it's a long one, pan-gray romantic, hetero-gray sexual. Pan-gray romantic, hetero-gray sexual. This is difficult to explain to one's family, friends, and partner when they are not familiar with the aro community. Could you lend me some tips on how to explain it effectively? So this is a fantastic question, and I'm so glad that we got it. And I think perhaps we should start with just breaking down the term. Of course, everybody will define their words for themselves in slightly different ways, so recognizing that we're kind of imposing our own definitions on top for folks, but doing the best we can. So the first word was pans-gray romantic. So pan is an attraction to all genders. So basically, if you're attracted to the person, it doesn't really matter what the genitals are or what the gender presentation is. And gray means somewhere on the spectrum of asexuality. And romantic means a sense of romantic attraction, or perhaps that you're somewhere in the realm of asexuality, but romance is an important part of the attraction. So pan-romantic often means that you can have a romantic attraction to any sex or gender. And so here we have pan-gray romantic. The second word was hetero-gray sexual. So hetero is attracted to the opposite gender or sex, and gray is on the spectrum of asexuality, and sexual, of course, is sexual attraction. So romance, I would guess, is pansexual and gray, and sexual attraction sounds like it's hetero and gray as well. Does it sound like I got that right?
That's how I'm reading it as well. I mean, if we do get this wrong for the listener out there,
I'm so sorry.
We do apologize. This is how we read things, and so we try to answer the question as we read it. If we're off on this question, you can always write in again and tell us how we can do it better.
Yeah, definitely. And then aro, so being aromantic is how I'm reading that for the aro community. So, with this many terms put together, which personally I think this is fantastic to know oneself this well and to be able to put this kind of language together. But we're not really in a place in our culture and society where folks are prepared for this level of insight from people when they are disclosing things about their attractions. First impressions, Austin?
Yeah, I absolutely like echoing the entire conversation. I think it's great that you're able to kind of find out who you really are and kind of explore all of that. And yeah,
it's a mouthful, eh?
Yeah.
And bold to be able to communicate it because we're not in a place where that's necessarily encouraged.
Well, and I think particularly, there's reference to explaining to one's family, friends, partner. I mean, we aren't raised to know these terms right now. We aren't educated around all the different terms. I was giving a presentation the other day to faculty at the University of Guelph, and I had a bunch of gender identity terms up on the screen, and we probably spent a good 5 minutes just going over the definitions of these terms as they were being used for the presentation. And these are individuals who are involved in higher education, air quotes. And, the fact is, at this level, we're still having these conversations, and that this information isn't out there. So let alone to individuals who might not have gone through some of this self-identification process for themselves. These kinds of terms can be harder to understand, but hopefully, individuals are open to learning at whatever stage they are in their career education.
And that definitely speaks to privilege a bit here too. So for folks who are, finding these terms, using these terms, and hoping that others will understand or be interested in learning, it's something that they don't necessarily have the privilege to walk away from or not worry about it. They can decide that they don't want to put their spoons or their resources there energy-wise, but it still is a topic of relevance for them. And then for others of folks who are kind of trying to decide whether they want to bother with learning this or not, whether they want to deal with it, whether they just want to put somebody in a category that's more comfortable or convenient for the listener, that does speak to a great deal of privilege. So, for anyone who's listening to this sort of language and thinking, oh my gosh, this seems kind of onerous to learn all this stuff, to be thinking that is quite a reflection of the privilege that you bring to it. You can decide whether to care or not, because it's not about you. And so hopefully their friends and family are recognizing that. Austin, do you hear folks getting into these kinds of descriptions of their romantic attractions and sexual attractions very often?
Yeah, I think it's really great, and I'm liking it.
Is it, do you hear people get into this kind of detail so much, or do you mostly hear folks using kind of, I don't know, maybe, I don't want to say more mainstream, but more commonly heard kind of descriptions, or do you think this is becoming more or less common?
Yeah, exactly. Especially with the person who asked the question, I've never kind of encountered an individual with that many descriptors, but I think that's fantastic. But yeah, a lot of people nowadays are just kind of sticking, in my opinion, they're kind of sticking with the whole, just the LGBT kind of trend. Nowadays we're talking about transgender issues are kind of now becoming a more common issue that's being discussed. There's
a little more awareness of the T in LGBT, but where's the A in all of it, right?
Exactly.
There's allies, but so even finding a sense of community and a place to turn to share these experiences with others might be difficult. You look like you're thinking something, Thomas.
Well, and I think about, when you go through a self-identification process, and, that's a struggle when you haven't been educated yourself on the language. So you have to determine, how are you feeling? How are you identifying yourself? And going out and finding these terms or creating these terms for yourself. And, that puts a lot of onus on a person. And so I think about, where they're in this question where they say this is difficult to explain to one's family, friends, and partner when they're not familiar with the Arrow community. I think we have to recognize that difficulty isn't just in the explaining to the family, friends, and partners. It's just coming to the understanding to begin with. Understanding who you are or who you have the sense of being. That's the first hurdle that someone has to come over, just coming to learn those things, and then being able to communicate that to individuals who haven't had that time or haven't taken that time to learn that information. That's a second, third, and fourth hurdle down the road. So I really do commend this individual for the accomplishments they've already made in terms of their self-identification process. But I think it's these next hurdles where it could be really great to take some time to delve into that.
I'm thinking about where the listener is who's hearing this, the friend or family member. And, some of the research out there talks a little bit about, for a parent especially, that there may be a grieving process and learning that their child's not straight. So in those particular research pieces that I've read, it's largely about hearing that a child is same-sex attracted or probably gay or lesbian, not even necessarily bi or pansexual. And looking at this idea of kind of the goals and hopes for the future for the child, and recognizing that these assumptions that one has had, culturally and socially speaking, may or may not be accurate. Now, of course, that could be the case for a child who's not same-sex attracted too. They could decide they don't want to have kids, they do want to have kids, they don't or don't want to get married, whatever. That is not in line with what the parents were guessing or hoping. So I wonder about the response of, what does this mean? Okay, you've given me this language, but functionally speaking, what does this mean? What do we expect for your future? And I'm wondering about that as part of the answer. What other things do the two of you think might come to mind for someone who's hearing this descriptor as possibly part of their first response? Do you have any thoughts, Austin? What it would be like to hear somebody introduce themselves this way, or say, hey, I have something really important to tell you, and kind of go in this direction?
I think for myself, just being a member of the queer community, I think I would, some of these terms, in all honesty, like, I've never heard about them until this kind of conversation, and kind of looking into it and kind of familiarizing myself with it. I would try to get to know more about this individual and see what I can do to help them out. But also at the same time, that not all individuals are like that, and some of them kind of just don't understand it.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said.
Yeah, so I think for me, as you were kind of explaining it, the question that I impose upon the listener is, well, what does this mean for me? That this person, maybe my child, my friend, my partner, has come out with this identity. Well, what does that mean in terms of my relationship with this person? What does that mean about my identity? So, as a partner who might learn that their partner identifies in this way, they might ask, well, does that change my sexual identity? Does that change my conception of self? Because as you're learning, you sort of have to understand that you're both an individual, but now you're also part of a relationship. And there's some confusion and some learning and conversations that have to emerge from that part. And the same as a parent. You talked about sort of that grieving process, but then it's, that sense of, well, how do I tell other people my child's identity and how they self-identify? And using my air quotes here, what burden does that put on me to then have to inform others about this identity every time they ask, oh, is your child, seeing someone? Or, so I'm not saying that it's right or wrong. It isn't meant to be sort of a judgment comment.
Complex.
Yeah, and I think we need to recognize that can be part of the difficulty, that when we do come out to someone, we do share with them parts of our identity, recognizing that they also have some learning to undergo about what that means in their life and what they're willing to accept and change and participate in.
This has me thinking about the coming out process for all kinds of different identities. So oftentimes when someone's thinking about coming out, even if it ends up getting blurted out kind of in an unplanned way or something, the individual has been thinking about it for a while because they've been navigating that in their life, their outness and whatnot. And then there's a disclosure, and then the people who are receiving this information, maybe they always kind of knew, or maybe they didn't at all, or maybe they guessed something, but they didn't guess this. And to recognize then that the listener hasn't had this amount of time to think about what their response will be, or to have the opportunity to educate themselves around it. So it has me thinking a little bit about the expectations for coming out to folks and the timeline of that. But also making a decision for oneself about how much of an educator you want to be. It's not your job to necessarily, or it's not our job, I should say, to necessarily educate people about our queerness, right? There's a whole internet for that, which may or may not have useful information. And, one of the resources we used for this segment was asexuality.org, which had some good definitions on it, which maybe Austin can share some from the University of North Carolina Chapel Hill LGBTQ Center in a moment. But think about, how much of an educator do I want to be, or do I just want to redirect people to resources? How much time can I give people to say, hey, I'm going to give you some information. I know you're going to take some time to think about it, maybe educate yourself a little bit, and then perhaps later we can get together and talk about it. And there may be different ways to pace that. Tell us about some of the stuff you have there, Austin.
Yeah, so basically, from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill LGBTQ Center, they had a lot of great resources, basically kind of explaining the different kind of terms that are used in the LGBTQ plus community. They talked about asexuality, attraction, kind of romantic orientation. They kind of broke down some of the examples of romantic orientations, though it's not an entire list because individuals can choose how they want to identify. And there's just like a lot of great resources that are available and can really support individuals who are kind of deciding on how they want to kind of tell individuals in their lives about how they choose to identify.
I'm also thinking about the importance of letting people know how much it's okay to share. So I'm telling you, but I'd like you to not tell other people because I'm going to tell other people. Or I'm telling you because I know you're really good socially, and I'm counting on you to let a lot of other people know so that I don't have to go make this announcement a million times. Or wherever in there you might want to be. Some people just put it out there on social media and let it go through the vine, which would give you the opportunity to share some resources at the same time.
So one thing that,
please.
Just to build into that as well, because in the question it's ended with, could you lend me some tips on how to explain it effectively? So just want to make sure we get to that point of it as well. I think where we've talked about starts to get into how to explain, but maybe some specific tips that we each might have around how to explain it effectively, but also maybe how to be a good listener. So
I like
going
that
from
one.
both sides.
Yeah. So I think that what does it mean, what's the applied take-home message is kind of the too long didn't read sort of part at the end. So here's me, here's my identity, here's the words that I'm using. What this means is that, functionally speaking, please don't ask me about dating people because I don't. Or, and I'm just coming up with examples. I can't say this person is or isn't dating. They certainly very well could be. In fact, they're asking about partners. So there you go. So, it could mean when you're asking about who I'm dating or when you're asking about things like that, it means that I'm interested in these folks and not in these folks. Or you might see me with this and not with that. Or, I'm really interested in dating you. I'm romantically attracted to you, but not sexually. I'm sexually attracted to you, but romance goes a different way for me. Whatever the case is, there's that little bit of applied piece at the end so people understand where to position themselves. I think that can be very important, even if you're not taking on the role of fully educating the other person. I don't know. What would be your number one tip for how to explain this effectively to someone?
Trying to think of the way to say this. I just think your comfort level. Mm-hmm. I think comfort level is a really, really important thing. Just kind of running on my experiences with kind of coming out and explaining to friends and family and individuals around my life is really feeling how comfortable you are with telling that person. If you feel comfortable with it, then for sure go for it. But if you feel the time's not right, then maybe kind of reevaluate and think about how you want to explain to them, and think about what do you want? What's the outcome that you would want from the conversations?
I like that. What's that? What are you looking to get out of this? What are you hoping will be? And maybe that's something you can even communicate to the person ahead of time. Like, I'm hoping you'll just hear me out and then take some time to think about it. Or I could really use some support right now after I say this, or whatever the case might be.
Yeah.
What are you thinking, Thomas?
So I think mine, ties in with both of your recommendations. The first is recognize that you might have to explain this multiple times to individuals. Mm-hmm. That sometimes individuals don't hear you the first time, they don't hear you well the first time, or even the second, third, or 12th time. That if these individuals are important to have in your life, that sometimes that means we have to have these conversations more often than we would like to have them, about educating and sharing this information and what that means for you and what the outcomes are in terms of what your relationship will look like. The other piece that I would partner with...
Can I jump in one second?
Oh, of course.
I'm also thinking when you're talking about repeating it, that if these are terms people aren't used to hearing, they might kind of conveniently forget repeatedly. And so it depends on how much you want it to stick with them, too. Mm-hmm. Yeah, continue.
And and I think that builds into this next piece about know the context in which you're going to be disclosing this information in. For some individuals, they like to have this conversation while driving in a car with their family, friends, or partner. Some individuals prefer, sit down in a neutral location, some in sort of the comfort of a familiar place. Just
put it out on Twitter.
Yeah, or put it out on Twitter. And so just know what you're comfortable with and where you feel secure in doing this sort of information sharing. And, maybe also thinking a little bit about, as a listener or for the listener, where they might be most comfortable in hearing this information. There's always that story out there of, someone was in the passenger seat and told their mother while she was driving that, they came out as gay, and the mother drove into a telephone pole.
That's one way to handle it.
Not intentionally. I think it was more of just there was a surprise in the situation. I mean, I wasn't there. This might just even be a myth of a story.
I'm sure it's happened somewhere.
But it's just knowing what is the right situation for you. And that includes what time is right for you, what amount of time. Maybe you don't want this to be a 1-hour conversation. You want it to just be 5 minutes. I'm telling you this, and then I need to be somewhere else for my self-care. Okay. So know your context. Know what will be safe for you. Know what's secure for you. And, hopefully have a friend, colleague, someone out there afterwards who, if things don't go well in that disclosure period, that you can talk to. And at Guelph, we have some great resources. We have Outline, which is an online resource where you can talk to individuals through online chats. There's Campout, which is a confidential weekly meeting space for LGBTQ2IA plus students to chat. And you can reach them at campout@uog.ca. So I think just make sure you look to what other resources could be out there in the unfortunate circumstance where maybe the disclosure doesn't go as you had hoped in the first time.
Or it goes well, but it's still exhausting. Or whatever those feelings might be afterwards, for sure.
I think self-care is just really important, especially afterwards. Even if it does go well or if it doesn't go well, it's always about kind of finding self-care for yourself and making sure you find some time for yourself because, yes, you're trying to look out for what others are feeling, but you always want to make sure that you put yourself as the number one priority.
And throughout, because it's never just one coming out, right? Exactly. It's navigating that constantly and navigating when to navigate it and when not to, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Very good. All right. So I think I speak for all three of us that we love you very much, and we're proud of you for recognizing this identity and recognizing that your identity may or may not change over time. And we hope that your coming out goes well and that your friends, family, and partners are keen to educate themselves and also to be supportive of you in the ways that you determine.
You're listening to Sexually Charged Radio at the University of Guelph on CFRU 93.3 FM and online at cfru.ca.
Welcome back, everyone. This is Ruthie here with Austin. Thomas has stepped out for a bit, but we are going to continue the conversation. Our next student question that's coming through our email address is... Are you ready for the oral sex one, Austin?
Oh, yeah.
All right, let's do this.
All the time.
In the short time that I've engaged in sexual activities, I've come to expect a certain level of reciprocity. For example, if I'm expected to head south, then you are too, etc. With my current partner, while I would happily give them oral, they have never tried to, nor do they want to. The one time I asked them about it in a non-sexual situation if they would. And I have no idea if they have any previous experience giving it. What do I do? First impressions on this, Austin.
Seems like the partner might be nervous.
Could be nervous. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Perhaps it's not a situation that we need to vilify at all. They could be inexperienced. They might not know the expectations. I have no idea what genders are involved here. Let's say that perhaps the person writing identifies as a woman and their partner identifies as a man. Certainly we have a social context where I think right now in this time in history, there's an expectation for women to provide men with oral sex, but not necessarily for there to be reciprocity. So I don't know what the genders are, but I think that supports that there could be gendered expectations or just assumptions that are not being discussed, regardless of the genders involved. That can certainly happen in same-sex relationships as well, with topping and bottoming and all sorts of stuff. What other things do you think might be happening here?
Yeah, I also think sometimes partners have they're nervous. They've never done it before. This might be kind of their first time kind of encountering this kind of situation, and they have no idea how to do it and if they're actually providing pleasure to their partner or not.
how to do it or how to do it right.
Exactly.
Or maybe they've had some previous experiences that just didn't go so well. Maybe they felt inept, or their partner may or may not have been kind, or maybe they just were confused and lost the whole time.
Exactly. And I mean, like, it's talked about a lot in a very casual form, and no individual really kind of learns it.
You either kind of stumble into the knowledge or you don't, and
Yeah.
most of us don't. So you said it's talked about in a casual form. Can you say a little bit more about this? Because, you know, in my world as a sexuality professional, probably the amount of personal disclosure that happens, both on a professional and a personal level, is just huge and profuse. You know, if one sex educator asks another sex educator what they like or want in a certain area, they're going to get a very long and detailed answer. I do not think I represent the general population. So enlighten me as to what these conversations are like for normal people that are not me.
Yeah, I bet you get a lot of...
I have a lot of information. From the left is better from the right, so on and so forth. Yes. So
Where the wind blows.
right? You know, where is the position of the moon right now? So yeah. So how do kids these days have these conversations about the oral sexes?
The oral sexes?
Yes.
I think it's just like, it's really casual. Like the media nowadays, like honestly, every kind of media you encounter will kind of make some kind of oral sex kind of joke.
Okay.
And there's always this like constant joking and not really kind of, it's very, let me try to find the right word for it.
It sounds like it's very much about humor.
Yeah.
Which can be a way to convey information, but is also a very confusing way to convey information, because is this a joke or is this someone giving information?
Exactly. And I noticed kind of the viewer says, or sorry, not the viewer, the listener, they have no previous experience giving it.
Well, it says that at a certain level of respect, so they don't know if their partner has experience or not. I don't know. I don't have any idea if they have any previous experience, and they have limited experience themselves. The person writing in does.
Mm-hmm.
So, in this, you know, I'm thinking about the role of exploration. I'm also thinking about the possibility of interest in protection around this too. So there is a lot of importance around considering whether or not to use protection for oral sex. And this is everybody and their partner's decision on their own to decide. Certainly it's not my place to make the decision one way or the other. I think a lot of folks don't recognize that there are safer sex concerns around oral sex. There's a number of sexually transmitted infections that can be given orally. And oftentimes when we go to get tested, we don't ask for oral swabs, and the doctors don't necessarily provide it either. So chlamydia, gonorrhea, HPV, several others, most of these can be treated, some cannot, can all impact us orally. So there's also the possibility that this partner might want a conversation on protection or may not, and that can be a difficult thing to bring up too. Folks are not always very receptive to hearing that request.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's great that the university has a lot of opportunities to provide safer sex kind of supplies, and they are available throughout campus. Mm-hmm. I know one place is the Wellness Education Center, which
do a great job. Yeah.
And they do a great job on kind of talking about communication and safer sex. They have a lot of different kind of info kits and pamphlets. They also have they have dental dams and condoms and all those kind of supplies that are available to students.
So let's talk about what kind of barriers can be used during oral sex. So this is a little bit of a sidetrack, so hopefully our writer is interested in this. So wearing an outie condom, so typically called male condoms, the ones that go over a penis, provides a useful barrier. Obviously, there can be some mouth contact with areas that aren't covered by the condom, so it's not perfect. And then dental dams are a thin sheet of latex that you can put over the anus or over the vulva and vagina. And either case, in any of these, you don't want to like flip them over or reuse them or anything like that, because that kind of ruins the point. But it makes sure that the mouth is not directly touching the genitals of the partner. And, that can also be useful in a lot of reasons besides protection, too. If folks are unsure about taste and smell and things like that, I always want everyone to be comfortable with their bodies, comfortable with the way we taste and smell naturally. But, in reality, different folks feel differently about taste and smells of other bodies. So using those kind of barriers can also be helpful if someone really wants to enjoy this with their partner, but having a little less direct contact in the taste and smell area could be helpful. Sometimes they also give nice stimulation as well. Some people really like the sensations of latex or the different poly materials too.
Yeah, for sure.
What if their partner is just selfish? Austin, I think that's a distinct possibility.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes people are just really like to receive better than they like to give. They don't even necessarily think about giving. Or if they are getting a good deal by receiving a lot and not giving very much, they might think, why do I want to change this?
And that does happen. That does happen.
Yeah.
People might enjoy it a lot, and they're like, I'll let you.
I'll let you take care of that yourself.
Yeah.
So I can think of two different possibilities with this. If it's the case that the other partner just would like to receive and doesn't want to return, and maybe it's not because they're selfish, there could be other issues there too, but the end result is that it's becoming very one-sided. I'm thinking about the possibility of either asking them to do more and seeing if there's a way to navigate that, or reducing the amount of oral sex that you're offering.
And I think those both of those options are something that you could consider.
How would you have a conversation about either of those, Austin? Because I would think that either of those topics could be, no pun intended, a little bit touchy.
And yeah, exactly. Really kind of just like sitting them down and just have a conversation. Mm-hmm. Be like, hey, I'd really enjoy if you went down on me a little bit more often too. Do you enjoy it when I go down on you? Mm-hmm. And you can kind of, it doesn't have to be like a very serious sit-down conversation. It can be a casual one. Mm-hmm. In the same sense where it's like, hey, like, I enjoy when you go down on me as much as you enjoy me going down on you. Mm-hmm. Hey, let's give it a try.
Absolutely. I'm also thinking that maybe the relationship dynamic needs to shift away from oral sex towards other activities. You know, if one person likes giving more than the other one does, there's still lots of fun things you can do with each other that do or don't include any kind of intercourse. So, you know, giving each other hand jobs and manual stimulation, using sex toys, all sorts of other things that can work to turn people on and be arousing and get people off. And it could be that in this relationship, exchanging oral sex doesn't happen that often. Or perhaps the person who's writing is still providing oral sex to their partner, but the other partner is really enjoys, let's say, returning manual sex and can be, maybe they're really great at it or really motivated. And it may turn out that feels like a good balance because the other person is really into it. And so everybody's kind of sticking with what they're into the most. There's a lot of possibilities, but to me, I think the communication around it would be key to say, you know, this is getting a little frustrating for me. I'd like to find out where you're at with this, or what's happening, and how we can find a balance that works well for the two of us.
Yeah, exactly. And with sex, it's exhaustive. The list is exhaustive.
So many ways to have fun.
Exactly. And there's not just one. Oral isn't just the only way.
Mm-hmm. And not even just one location for oral. There's lots of places you can use your mouth on a partner.
Exactly. And I think it's just really kind of exploring as the relationship is figuring out where both partners kind of stand on different things and exploring what both partners can agree on.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And, you know, also talking about the nature of the relationship, whether it's an exclusive dating situation or not. You know, it may be that there's some things you're doing with one partner, and there's other things you're doing with a different partner. And as long as everyone's aware of that and whatever safety precautions folks decide are the most desirable or most necessary for them too. Just returning to the question, let's see if we answered all of it here. Yeah. And, you know, I would also say if the partner is listening to this, that if you realize that you're receiving some really good stuff from one of your partners, but you're not really stepping up to it, you can, or you're not meeting that equally, you can also initiate that conversation, right? You may have a feeling that perhaps things are imbalanced in your favor, and that's also a really caring time to bring up the topic with your partners and say, hey, I noticed I'm receiving a lot of great oral from you. I'm not necessarily returning it. Here's some of my thoughts on why, and what can we do to make sure this relationship, that we both feel like we're both getting the best end of the deal.
Exactly.
Any closing thoughts for them?
Sex can be great.
That is the best closing thought ever. Excellent. Excellent.
Exactly.
All right, so let's take a pause and hear about our station and how to send your emails to us at Sexually Charged. You're listening to Sexually Charged Radio at the University of Guelph on CFRU 93.3 FM and online at cfru.ca. We can't replace personalized professional advice of a medical or counseling nature.
While we do talk about real people's questions and real-life situations, these conversations aren't intended as advice for them or for anyone else.
Welcome back. It's Ruthie and Austin here, and we have another question submitted by one of our students here at the University of Guelph, and that question is, the person I'm currently seeing doesn't like talking about sex. They say they don't see the point. I come from a very sexually open household in which I was taught that discussing sex was what helped people have safe and healthy sexual relations. How do I get my partner to understand how important it is to me that we have these discussions? Austin, first impressions.
Yeah, so what I'm getting from this is kind of the individual who's sending us this kind of question is very open, very open about sex, which is absolutely awesome. And the partner doesn't seem to really enjoy talking about sex, which is perfectly fine as well. But
oh, yes and no. Is it perfectly fine? There's a question.
Yeah. So kind of diving into that kind of perfectly fine is... communication is really important, in my opinion, and with my prior relationships, I think that my relationships could have definitely improved if both partners were more verbal about what they wanted. And yeah.
So we have two different sets of expectations here in this couple about sexual communication and talking about sex. And, for some folks, the idea is that sex should come naturally. And doesn't need to have a lot of discussion, or it even, ruins some of the mystery and the mystique, or just becomes inappropriately too much information. For other folks, talking about sex just makes it too real. Maybe they are not comfortable with acknowledging the fact that they're sexually active, and so talking about it makes it less possible to avoid acknowledging that you're doing that, or that that it's, it doesn't just happen. It's actually something that you have incorporated into your life and into your relationship. There's lots of different reasons to be uncomfortable talking about sex. Some folks just feel like they don't know the answers about things. So perhaps they don't want to talk about it because they don't really know what they like, or they don't really know the language around their bodies or things like that. So lots of possible reasons. But there's also a lot of reasons to be talking about sex. And, this is a student writing in, so I don't know their age, but they might possibly be a young adult or a late teenager. And, this is also the time in life when it's really appropriate to be gaining these skills, and not necessarily, really there's no time when I expect anyone to be perfect talking about sex. But now is a great time to be making an extra lot of mistakes by trying lots of communication around it, because this is the right time of life for learning these kinds of social skills. And sex in general, but also talking about it, those are both social skills, things that you learn in relationship with other people, that you practice with your friends and your lovers and things like that. So, I think that there's a certain amount of encouragement for young adults to be talking about sex to a certain degree, but I think what's okay to talk about and what isn't, that line comes up pretty quickly. Would you say that that's true?
Yeah, I mean, talking about sex is always a taboo kind of subject, especially if that's not something you usually talk about. Mm-hmm. If you don't usually talk about it, it can be a very uncomfortable kind of topic to bring up or even have. Mm-hmm. I know people are squeamish when you start talking about sex.
Mm-hmm. Earlier you mentioned humor as one way in which oral sex can be talked about sometimes. So I wonder if it's the same for sex in general, that it's okay to talk about if you're joking about it, or maybe even if you're bragging about it, depending on your circles, but to have earnest conversation, or even to say, there's things that I don't know how I feel about or want to try, and I'd like to explore that with you. That's very vulnerable, very vulnerable.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Especially if you just kind of get a no back.
Yeah, oh yeah.
If you get the no, then...
Or that look, not even a yes or a no.
Yeah.
Or that really awkward place where the person is like, okay, and so they're consenting to it, but they're not bringing in the kind of active, interested engagement that maybe feels safe and comfortable to have somebody have with your body.
Exactly, what's coming out of their mouth versus what they're probably thinking.
Right. Oh, great. So you don't want to be here and you're going to do it anyway. Sounds like a fun night. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's probably the last thing you would ever kind of want from a conversation.
So this brings up how to hear people when they are asking for something or talking about something they like, how to receive that conversation, especially if it's not something you're interested in.
Yeah.
Do you have any tips for that?
Kind of bringing up...
Well, let's say I was to say, let's make it nice because you're a student and I'm a professor. Let's make this about going out to lunch instead of about a sexual encounter. So I'm vegetarian. So if I was like, hey, what would really thrill me is if the two of us made our own tofu. Austin, would you make tofu with me? And perhaps, I don't know if you're vegetarian or not, but let's pretend you're not. Your initial thought to that is, yeah, I don't want anything to do with tofu. That sounds awful. So how would you, as a kind, caring partner or friend, perhaps approach responding to an offer or a request that you're just not interested in?
Sorry, Ruthie. Not a big fan of tofu.
Yeah. So there's an honesty, but you affirmed the relationship without apology in the beginning. Yeah. You said something in the beginning that's like, hey, sorry about this. I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I'm not a big fan. Might you possibly return some other offer instead?
Yeah. That's always, hey, Ruthie, not a big fan of tofu, but let's go for a veggie burger instead.
Awesome. So there's other options as well. So that affirms the relationship and says, I want to continue to explore things with you, but it's not going to be making tofu, right?
Yeah. And I think it's really not just saying no, more of like no, but.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think the no, but is a really big thing that personally I think is really important, is saying no, but kind of giving an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And that keeps the conversation rolling too, instead of just like, yeah, no tofu. And then we stare at each other awkwardly for a while, and then like, oh, okay,
Exactly, yeah. And, I mean, obviously, communication is so key. It's so key. It's finding kind of like the comfort level and boundaries of individuals and kind of their sexual exploration.
Mm-hmm. So you have one person who wants to talk and the other person who's just against the idea in general. I am wondering how long this relationship has been together, and if the other areas of the relationship make it worthwhile to put in the amount of effort that may be necessary to meet in the middle. Or, I mean, the end of this person's question is really telling. How do I get my partner to understand how important it is to me to have these discussions? So there's a few concerns. This is important to one person, but the other partner doesn't seem to be validating that it's important to them. So whether they agree or not, are they recognizing that it's important to the partner who wants to talk? Are they routinely not valuing things that the asker values in the relationship? I would wonder about that. Doesn't mean they aren't, but I wouldn't assume that they are. But this, how do I get my partner to understand? There's this whole like, how do I show them the light? How do I get them to get it? And there's that old phrase, you can lead a horse to water, but you literally cannot make a horse drink, right? Mm-hmm. So, this notion of I have to make my partner get it is a little bit distressing. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. Like, as you were saying, like, it's really important that you're having that kind of discussion and recognizing in a relationship that this is important to a partner, and the other partner should at least kind of acknowledge the importance in the other person's.
Yeah, if it's important to you, it's important to me because it's important to you. It may never be important to me on its own, but you're important to me, this is important to you, therefore I want to try and meet you in the middle or validate or value that in some way.
Kind of showing that opportunity.
Absolutely. So there's a big kind of movement to just let sex happen. It's often been that way for lots of different reasons. So this notion of, just come over to my apartment, Netflix and chill and we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens, right? And I'm fine, with these kind of casual invitations towards sex. That can be lovely. Maybe it reduces the pressure on folks because, nowadays people probably understand what Netflix and chill means, but there's also this notion that you can opt out more easily. You're not coming over being like, all right, we're going to come over and have sex. And you get there and you're like, But it doesn't necessarily open up an opportunity for conversation on what folks are expecting or wanting out of it. And the notion that the person that you're with can just intuit what you want, or on the other side, that you will kind of put up with whatever they're willing to do with you in hopes that something that you like will happen, that's a little bit distressing. How are you going to get what you want if there's not any direct conversation around that or communication? So this is something I probably spend too much time thinking about, which is how folks how folks communicate what they're interested in, and then I wonder, are they really getting what they want? And, you know, some of the research is showing that folks are not really necessarily getting what they're hoping for. They're hoping for something, and they might be getting something, but it could be so much better than that, you know?
Yeah. I definitely, like, understand where you're coming from. Especially with, like, today's society, Netflix and chill is such a huge kind of topic that people talk about, because most of the time it is implying that sex will be involved. And, however, the word sex is never used. Far
from it. And it's very, not just far from the word sex being in there, but kind of the opposite of it. I mean, I think that most people around sex kind of get a little excited about it. Maybe the opposite of chill. Or maybe I'm just an old person understanding it wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, like a lot of, especially like I know my friends who encounter Netflix and chill. They all know that sex will be involved at the end of the day. But yeah, they never talk about what's going to happen. They know that sex will happen, but
what kind of sex?
What kind
of
sex?
How is the sex going to work? Like, is it going to be the kind of sex that I'm hoping we'll have? You know, what about protection expectations? You know, does this mean something about the two of us? Can we tell our friends about it? You know, there's a whole bunch of things that go unaddressed by that. And there's some fun of the anticipation of not knowing what's going to happen, for sure. I mean, obviously, if this weren't enticing, nobody would use this kind of code for it. You know, but and there's a lot that you can say about not having to take responsibility around it if it just happens, right? But just happens still counts.
As it happened, yeah.
Yeah, and why not try to get the best sexual encounter you can have with the person that you're Netflix and chilling with, right?
Exactly. I mean, the Netflix selection might be a great selection, but the chill part, maybe not.
Yeah. Who knows? It could be really great if the both of you knew what the other person was hoping for out of it. You know, perhaps those are things that both of you would be really interested in doing together, but they might not be the default thing that you do with a hookup partner, you know?
Exactly. And I think it's just having that kind of conversation is so important. And with Netflix and chill, you don't really get the opportunity. It's more of their default kind of sexual activity that they're doing.
Yeah. Which can be comfortable and less vulnerable feeling if you have kind of these default things that you can do in a casual situation. But again, are you getting what you necessarily want? Are you tolerating things that you don't want? You know, are you having the opportunity to learn all these great social skills around communicating sexually and sharing things you like? A confident partner is often a very attractive partner, and, you know, one way for that confidence to happen is an open, caring, and mutually encouraging conversation about stuff. And just because somebody tells you something that they're interested in, it's an invitation. It's not a requirement, you know, and you can always decline that invitation or counter with a different one.
And yeah, I think a lot of people mistake kind of people sharing what their sexual preferences are as kind of a demand rather than an invitation.
Absolutely. And it can feel very vulnerable to put that out there and not have it received in a affirming way. Like, oh yeah, I'm really into that too. And they're like, oh great, we're both into this thing. But if the other person's like, oh, I don't even know what that means, you know, or, you know, that's not really something I want to do or not something I want to do with you, it can be a little bit challenging to figure out how to roll forward from that. And maybe it's not a good hookup, you know, maybe it's not the one that you want to have. Maybe the Netflix is better than the chill. And that's okay, too, to find out that it's not necessarily the best match. There will be another person you can have sex with. I promise it will happen for you.
It's bound to happen.
Sooner or later. So with this particular partner where one of them values talking about sex and the other one doesn't, how do I get my partner to do it? So one of my thoughts really is, are the two of you on the same page in enough areas of the relationship that it's worthwhile nurturing this part of it? That may not be the most politically correct thing to say. But, you know, perhaps this isn't the best relationship to be sexual in. You know, there's kind of thought, like, if you're not mature enough to handle talking about it, you're not mature enough to do it. That's kind of harsh, but that's one particular way of looking at it. The other thing is, you know, does your partner fully understand how important this type of conversation is? And are they the kind of person who's willing to learn from you? And if they're not, it may not be necessarily a positive relationship to be in either. I also wonder about things like establishing consent with your partner when you can't really talk about it, and what that looks like. So you're also kind of robbed of those sort of opportunities, but also the opportunity to just get excited with each other. If you can't really talk about it, how do you share those fantasies or bat those text messages back and forth, or whatever the case may be? I feel like you just could be missing out on a whole lot.
Yeah, exactly. And as you were saying, communication is key. Like, you don't know what the boundaries are and what they're willing to try and what they're not willing to try. And you're always you could enter kind of a situation like that and just be like, I don't enjoy this.
Right.
I don't enjoy this. And kind of you're in the situation and you're like, how do I address it now that we're in the middle of it, that I'm not enjoying it?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I had known you're a tongue-in-ear kind of person, I could have let you know that I either really like that or really hate that. But now we're in the middle of it. It feels even worse to set a boundary, although you can always set a boundary at any time. But a little conversation ahead of time could have gone a long way on that.
Exactly. And kind of going off on that, I've had conversations with friends who've said they faked it. They faked the pleasure.
Right. Which is going to make it difficult to have a positive hookup the next time. Either they're not going to want to, or you're getting in a pattern of, great, now I don't know how to tell the other person that this thing that I portrayed as really liking, because I just wanted it over with, or I didn't know how to address it, now they're going to want to do it again. Because they think it works. And
then, how about when you come to the point where you can't stand it? You can't fake anymore.
Right.
If you can't fake anymore, how do you address it? Do you end it?
Yeah, hey, I've been lying this whole time. You know.
And it can be so damaging to have that kind of conversation. Like, hey, I didn't enjoy it the entire time.
Yeah, yep. Yeah, absolutely. Or you just don't end up getting together again, which, is okay, but that's kind of an unfortunate reason to not get together again. But maybe perhaps better that it be that the two of you aren't a good match than that you're not able to communicate openly with anybody.
Yeah.
That will make it difficult. So you bring up an important thing about faking too, which this is not necessarily related to this question at all. But I'm thinking about gender and faking, and oftentimes folks think that only women fake it. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely not.
Would you feel comfortable talking about that a little more?
Sure.
Okay, so tell me what your friends have to say about this.
What my friends have had to say about it? I can dive into my own personal experience.
If you're comfortable sharing with the world, we bring it.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, sometimes when people are trying to do something and it's not exactly the greatest, it's awkward. It's awkward to have that kind of conversation. Be like, hey, whoa.
This isn't working for me.
This isn't really working. Maybe next time the wind blows another way, we'll try. But not now.
People and bodies are funny. It's kind of hard to know what will and won't work. Some things you know ahead of time, and sometimes you don't until you're in there, and it's different with different people at different times, too.
And I mean, we always say that our bodies are unique. And what works for one partner might not work for the other.
And what works with one partner might not work with another.
Exactly.
So all anatomies can potentially fake pleasure. Absolutely. That has been what I have heard as well. I have only lived as one anatomy myself, but my understanding is that everybody can. So even just thinking, well, I don't necessarily need to talk about it because I can read their body language, it's not necessarily accurate for anyone, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like it's so much more effort trying to fake it. You're just lying there, and you're like, or whatever position you're in. You could just be doing this, and you're like, no. Yeah,
I am just trying to get through this and thinking about what I can do later.
And are you done yet?
Yeah. Who wants to be in that sort of situation? So it sounds to me like the cons are quite significant around not talking about it, especially when one person is really interested in it and doesn't necessarily want to go through all of this deception in a relationship. And not talking about it sounds like a lot of opportunity for deception, which is not a great basis. You're listening to Sexually Charged Radio at the University of Guelph on CFRU 93.3 FM and online at cfru.ca. And we've got these journal articles in front of us talking about, sexual disclosures, connections to relationship satisfaction and closeness from the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy, 2014 by Tina, I'm not going to say it right, Kofelt and John Hess. And, they're talking about these folks that they interviewed who have been married for an average of almost 14 years for these various couples. They all happen to be straight couples in this sample, I think. Well, anyway, a bunch of them were, if not all of them. And, they've found that even in these long-term relationships, people still have to disclose about things that are and aren't working, and positive disclosures are leading to better relationships at all levels and all ages.
Yeah, and as you were just saying, as a matter of fact, like high levels of relational satisfaction is from basically disclosing what you enjoy sexually. Mm-hmm. And a lot of couples are saying that when they disclose that kind of information of what they enjoy, they're having a better time. They're having a lot more fun.
They're closer. They're more emotionally bonded. A good partner wants to give you things that you enjoy. They may not want to give you everything that you enjoy because they may enjoy different things, but they want to give you things they enjoy, and they want to receive things that they enjoy as well. And without that kind of communication, how can you build that sort of relationship? Even in an anonymous hookup, right? Let's say you're only going to have like 15 minutes with each other or something like that. A little bit of communication can go a long way to match your hopes and expectations for that anonymous situation.
Exactly. I mean, with NSA, you still want pleasure at the end of the day.
Right. You're there because you want something.
You want something out of it. And hopefully the person that you're with can give you that kind of pleasure.
But they won't have the opportunity if they don't know what's going on.
Exactly.
So it can be vulnerable. It can feel a little more intimate than your typical not really talking about thing. But that can be something you can think about and practice with different partners if that's the kind of sex that you want to have too. Like, how can I communicate little enough that I can kind of keep this NSA thing that I want, but enough that I'm able to, establish the little bits of consent, protection, and pleasure that I want to be talking about.
Exactly. And I mean, as you were saying before, if they can't have that kind of conversation, should they really be conducting that kind of sexual activity?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Austin, thank you so much for joining us for this hour. It has been fantastic talking with you. Last episode, I just asked a question. I asked for 3 words about it. So do you have a particular topic that you want to do for a lightning round with 3 words, or should I come up with one?
Take it away.
Oh my goodness, I didn't plan ahead for this. All right, 3 words on what makes for good sexual communication.
As descriptive.
Descriptive, great.
Being put on the spot.
I'm going to say vulnerable. I think just a little bit of vulnerability is important, but sex in itself is vulnerable. So that makes sense. And you know what? I'd rather find out at the communication part than the sex part.
Exactly.
So you said descriptive?
Descriptive.
Vulnerable. Okay, your turn again.
Taking a leap of faith. Well, yeah, that's vulnerability.
Okay. No, that's okay. It's okay. Honest. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say fun for my last one. Either because the communication is fun or because hopefully it'll lead to something fun. You got a third one?
Oh. You got me stumped.
All right, we'll let you think on it. And we will wrap up from here. Thank you so much, Austin.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yay. Got a question for Sexually Charged Radio? Send it to asksc@uoguelph.ca. But please do note that not all questions are guaranteed a response or acknowledgement on the show. We'll let you know if your question's been selected for discussion. Your name will be omitted from the show, but your question will be read out loud if selected. This account is monitored by a peer wellness educator from the Wellness Education Center at the University of Guelph, not by the host of this program.
You're listening to Sexually Charged Radio at the University of Guelph on CFRU 93.3 FM and online at cfru.ca.